Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation and respect, the InkGuild acknowledges that we live, work, and play on the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and the Tsuut'ina nations. This territory is also home to the Métis nations of Alberta, Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all Indigenous and non-Indigenous to honor and celebrate this territory alongside us.
Gabe,
That feels like a trope. It's the trope of like, I am dying, so I have to live my life to the fullest for this short amount of period I have left.
Fault in Our Stars. I hate that book.
Mm-hmm. That's
a bad trope.
Yeah.
0 out of 10.
Oh my god, John Green.
Wait a minute.
What?
Cystic fibrosis. What a...
Okay, hold on.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. Just go to fucking therapy. You know what? I'm not going to say anything bad. I want to work with you publishers.
Don't correct me. I don't care.
Get an email.
Species. It's brilliant.
Look how stupid his fucking hair looks.
I would say spoiler alert, but like, don't read her books.
It was adorable.
It's very cringy. So cringe. Disgusting.
Aggressive support, yeah!
Thank you for the psychic damage. He's a furry that goes out at night and beats people up. Like, you're telling me he's competing with the flying Jesus metaphor?
I brought you to this podcast, I can take you out. I'm signing out of the cowboy episode, good night.
This is a powerful piece. So, did you get a degradation kink since we last talked? Because they're being real mean to you.
You got almost all of those wrong.
And
Oh, I forgot what I was...
You get distracted by Gabe.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. I'm Marie-Soleil, joined tonight by Gabe.
Hello.
Alex.
Hello?
And Dean.
Hi.
And tonight we will be talking about death.
Dun, dun, dun. We didn't want to make that dramatic.
Let's start this off with easy. Who's read a book or watched a movie that somebody died in?
Wait,
You know-
characters die?
You lost me at read a book.
I thought they lived forever. Okay, podcast over.
I guess we're done. I
Yes.
guess we don't have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
I have... Yes.
Good night,
Yes.
everybody. Here's the outro.
Death is a lie, actually.
You
I
all
just
live
tell you
forever.
that.
That's the best way to think. That's the point of existence.
Don't die up. You've all been tricked. You've all been fooled.
Yeah,
Wake
you
up.
live and you live longer. There's two things that are
Yes,
certain in
I
life. Okay, I'm gonna stop.
Please do. I was gonna say yes. I think everyone has read or watched or consumed some form of media involving death.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like a lot of fiction used to like is sort of a lot of kid maybe like this is like I have like kid memories, so I feel like a lot of kids fiction used to like avoid death, and I feel like it's become a lot more prevalent in like even like children's fiction. It's pretty much unavoidable. You're gonna see death if you watch movies or
Yeah, and
read
that's
books.
in the time then too. It's not just like with child fiction, it's certainly become a lot more prevalent, but with more adult fiction, it's also become a lot more like specific and visually visually specific. I think like it's become so much like more detailed, so much more like emotional in places, so much more disgusting sometimes.
I remember this one time as a kid, I was watching a Care Bears episode where they were investigating a murder.
Care Bears. Wow. But I was gonna say there wasn't a lot of death and stuff you consumed as a kid, because clearly you didn't read like the Warrior books.
No, I didn't.
There was a lot of death in those.
Yeah, they did.
They like at least every book at least.
And not just like quiet death off screen, violent death on screen.
That's so much. Wait, the Warriors books are all cats. I remember this. So like,
Yeah.
what the
Yeah.
fuck?
Kind of you, man. A cat will fuck you up. A cat will kill you over nothing. A cat will kill you for bus fare and then walk home.
Well, I
I'm just
figured, but
I'm
like,
just remembering fucking Tiger Star's death.
Oh yeah.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
Tiger Star is an amazing name for a cat, though. Complete side note.
He was the leader of... What was he the leader of at that point when he died? Was he the leader of Shadow Clan still?
Yes, he was leader of Shadow Clan, and he went and he got all the street cats to come to try to fight his war for him.
Fucking Scourge, like, ripped all 9 of his lives out of his chest at once.
Yeah, because like
Brutal.
in the warrior universe, cats don't all have 9 lives. You are gifted 9 lives if you are like the leader of a clan.
Ooh, that's really creative.
Yeah,
That's
very
a good.
cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
so like if the leader dies, they can come back. But the other cat just like tore him apart with these claws, and he bled out and came back and died and came back and died 9 times.
That's like really brutal for a kid's book.
That's fucked up.
Those books also had like a plague. They had, I want to say genocide.
Yeah.
What?
Those books were really intense. Either like you know or you don't.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
And then you've got like books that came out later, like Percy Jackson books that don't shy away from death. People die, but it's not all happening on like in the face of the characters. Like they are confronted by the death afterwards in other ways, like meeting up with the group and mentioning the missing faces, or seeing the trophies that the enemies are carrying that they took off of like your friends.
Mm.
I'm sorry, Percy Jackson came to mind because there's a bunch of people that say you're either a Warriors kid or you're a Percy Jackson kid. And I was both.
That's it.
Everyone I know growing up read both or neither.
Mm-hmm.
I read the
Just read
Warrior
Percy
Cats
Jackson.
before Percy Jackson came out.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. See, but like that's a really interesting like first conversation, I think, like on-screen versus off-screen deaths. How do we feel on that?
Off-screen deaths are bullshit.
Wait,
Depends on the context.
it definitely depends on context. Technically, like Mufasa's death is technically off screen.
I don't know. I feel like that's like you see it happen and you see his. I feel like to be. I mean, I wouldn't say that's an off-screen. I feel like if something is an off-screen death, it's like that's like some guy like comes rushing in the room. It's like, sir, the president, he's dead. And then,
Also,
and,
like
that's-
Lady Macbeth.
yeah, exactly. Bullshit. I hate that.
Yeah.
I hate that. Show me the death. I feel like I've been too conditioned by like the way that a lot of Hollywood movies are now with respects to death, and I guess we can get into this later if this is one of the topics you have. But like I feel like I've been way too conditioned. If like if a character doesn't die on screen, they're not dead. I don't accept it. I need to see them die. I need to see them physically die, brutally even, or else I'm just like, oh, they're just gonna come back later.
I feel like that's a difference with books and movies as well. Because in books, you can build up like the character interactions, and the reactions of characters finding out that somebody died in a book is often different than a movie, because in a movie it's such a shorter
Yeah, like they don't
piece
have
of
the
media.
time to like build it up in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's like a long running series and then
And
the
even
character
then-
dies in one of the later ones. But even
Yeah.
that can fall flat sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I still stand by it. Death off screen can be done well, and sometimes it should be done that way. Just because, like, sometimes you don't want. Sometimes you don't want to like brutally detail someone's death. Okay.
Yeah, but even then, to go off of that and to give like my stance on it, like it for me, it also depends. Like you certainly wouldn't want to showcase every like if you're watching something, if you're reading something, like it doesn't make a lot of sense to it doesn't make a lot of sense to like go very much into detail about any kind of death on screen or not without it making sense. Like if it relates to the character or if it's like some kind of dumb luck or something, like it has to just kind of work, I think, because an off-screen death, like if a character disappears and then they somehow like characters then later find out their body, like that starts a whodunit. That's really fun. That's a really fun way to kind of either get a plot going or like, kind of add in a lot of tension. So it can be done well off screen, but like on screen, with on-screen deaths, it really depends because obviously like it'll impact the audience a lot because you will see or read your character dying. But if it's just too much, then it's just too much. Right.
On-screen deaths have a shock value to them that off-screen deaths don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my problems with some, like, on-screen deaths can be done well, obviously, but a lot of times they are just used for shock value, and I hate that. I think that's a terrible way to write.
I think for me, I think my problem with off-screen deaths is that it sort of like dehumanizes it. I feel like, I mean, and this doesn't apply to all off-screen deaths because Dean, you mentioned whodunits, and that's a good point. I do love me a good whodunit, and those like very much rely on like having like a death happen off-screen, and then there's a whole mystery. You can't really have a mystery if the whole thing is shown. You got to build up to that. But I think like in the case of like a like there's just like a less mystery oriented story. Like if it's like I can't think of any examples at the moment, but if it's like just a normal action story, a fantasy or a science fiction thing, and like a character is killed off screen and they're like an important character to someone else, if it's an important character and like another character just comes into a room and is like, yeah, he died, and then the character is like upset at this and is like, how did he die? And he's like, yeah, he fucking died over there.
Yeah, and
it sucks. I feel like it's like dehumanizing almost. It's like I think a major issue I have with a lot of fictional deaths is that they end up just being about it's just a way to like get one of the other characters like to bull rush into a character arc. If it's like a revenge arc or a grief arc or something like that, they just want to get them in there as quick as possible. I feel like having that be off screen, it sort of takes the character out of the one who died, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, to agree with that. Yeah, it's certainly if you're, I think in a specific example, and I'll talk about this really quick. So in Gladiator, the movie, what is it? Maximus's family was killed off screen, or at least like they were killed off initially, but then, it, like for those who have seen it, like the bodies are shown hanging among the burnt house, and like that's a good way of kind of I guess like killing characters off screen, because it motivates your main characters, right? Like essentially, and I hate saying this of people, but just like for the purposes of the story, it gets it moving and it motivates your character. Like death off screen can be used to motivate your characters on screen. But certainly to agree with Gabe, like it does really feel dehumanizing when you as a creator have spent so much time building your character and like introducing to this world, like developing their personalities, just to take them out like that off screen, like away from the action too, of all places. Like that feels stupid. Like why would you do that?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. To me, this just sounds like if you write it well, it works. If you don't write it well, it's bad.
Well,
like
of
it doesn't. It sounds
course.
like a
Yeah.
quality writing error issue. It's not an off-screen on-screen death issue. It's a how well you write it issue.
Yeah.
It
Well, of
also feels like
course.
me it's a why did you kill this character off issue? Did you kill it off for plot advancement? Did you kill it off just for shock value? Did you kill it off to motivate your main character to do something? Did you kill them for man pain?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Gladiator is an interesting example to bring up too, because I feel like that one being off screen is also like just a tastefulness thing. Like they die pretty brutally from like the description, so it's like I feel like it makes sense to not show that in a.
That's my thing. Is if you're gonna like horrifically kill characters, especially like if they're like children, don't like. I don't want to see that. I don't want to witness that.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and that brings me back to like I was talking about Percy Jackson before, and a lot of these off-screen deaths happen in the battles during the War of Manhattan that they had. Like, Percy is like acting as general. He sends his friends out to different areas of the city, and then he sees the Minotaur coming, and on the Minotaur's hammer are a bunch of Camp Half-Blood necklaces that he's obviously taken off of the campers that he killed. And it's done in such a way that, like, yeah, you feel Percy's pain at his friends dying and everything.
But you also don't have to witness a bunch of teenagers being brutally murdered by the Minotaur.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or the scene from Mulan when they come across that village that is completely like destroyed. You don't see all like a pile of dead bodies. You see burned down houses and a doll on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's definitely ways to have the impact of the death be there without explicitly showing it. And in some cases, especially like in children's media, that's like a really like the better way to do it.
Yeah, you know what? I hadn't thought about Mulan. That's a good point. I'm coming around to it. I think like in my brain when I think of like on and off-screen death, I think my brain thinks of like the term off-screen death as being exclusively like a hand waved death, but like in I feel like a lot of the examples you guys have brought, I'm like coming over to it.
Yeah, and maybe in another kind of unrelated instance, like when we're talking about like specifics, like war movies come to mind where you don't always have to show everyone getting absolutely slaughtered to realize just how terrible and how terrible the war was. And the one that does it really well is 1917, in my opinion, because in 1917 everyone knows that the two world wars were like horrible, but you don't ever really and maybe especially in the first few minutes, you don't ever really see that many soldiers dying. You just have like when your two protagonists, and spoilers for 1917, but like when your first two characters like leave the trenches and there's all of this like death like thing, there's like these dead there's these dead people, there's like clothes everywhere, a whole bunch of like dirt, like skeletons even. It's horrifying, and you didn't need to showcase any of that to kind of get you didn't need to showcase all of those people dying to get the point across that this is a horrible, horrible thing. And especially to add a lot of tension to your story, because your two characters could die at any moment, right? And like having everything there already without explicitly showing how it all got there works completely fine. It sets the tone and like adds a lot of tension already.
Yeah.
I think if are we good to move on? Because I think this opens us up to talking about like why you should kill a character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, I personally think you should only kill off a character because like it matters to the story. And you shouldn't introduce a character just to kill off for shock value. They should have a point in why they're dying.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, if your character has been introduced with a personality backstory, or if people care about your characters, there has to be good justification for you, be it like through setting, be it through their own character arcs, be it through like through the world that you've built, that they would be taken away from everyone. Because it's essentially like you've given us someone to like see this world through from their perspective. To take that perspective away, there has to be a good fucking reason to do that.
Or like, if you need to kill off characters just to show that something bad is happening, like we were talking about a war or there's a plague, don't focus on the characters themselves, but the aftermath of their death, so to speak.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to name like 20 some characters that are all like members of like this army and just mention, like, describe what they look like just to kill them off, because that's going to feel flat. But you can describe like somebody picking up the dog tags so they can ID these people who've passed. Like, they can't take all of the bodies home, but they can collect the dog tags so that they can send letters home to their families. You could show the general writing the letters home to families.
Mm-hmm. There's a good example of that, actually, with what you mentioned, Marie-Soleil, about like, you don't have to name every single person that you kill. And the example that fits well into that is The Last of Us Part 2. Because they tried doing that, wherein like, if you killed like a person, or if you killed a dog, like the NPCs around you would be like, "Oh no, character name," and then it's all supposed to tie into the fact that like, you're going on this path of revenge. Like, here are the consequences of you doing so. You're killing real people with real names, and it's like, doesn't feel right, because like, in a video game, when you're because in a video game you have NPCs to go through anyway, that initial message feels very interesting at first, but then after hearing those same kind of things like happen more than once, you're like, and maybe that's just for me, right? Like, I know Gabe has also played it, so I can't speak on his he probably doesn't share the same perspective that I do, but like, on the topic of like, naming, like, having, giving significance to characters that die, like, there certainly is like a good way of doing it. Like, not everyone needs to be named and then dead. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think my issue with that game's approach to death is less that like they don't that they overuse that. It's more that like, it sort of railroads you. Like, I feel like in a game like Dishonored, you have like you that also does that thing where you have like access to like each different characters, like you get little glimpses into their backstory, into their life, and you can see them go through their routine, and they're like people. But I think Dishonored does a good job of emphasizing like player choice, and I feel like The Last of Us very much is like, okay, here are your guns, you use them, and it's like, now feel bad. And it's like, you didn't give me any other choice. You told me to do this, and you gave me no other options. Why are you shaming me for it? I feel like it's very. And then like, I feel like it's like the name stuff. It's like it's a very manipulative game. It's like emotion. It's like a manipulative. It's like manipulatively written.
Yeah. Like, the whole point is to, the whole point of the message is like, oh, revenge is bad, don't go down this path. But then it's like, at the same time, you are playing a video game where you're given access to like how many guns and like how many ways to kill people,
and
like,
no non-lethal options.
Yeah, like, it's a lot of very like creative ways to like murder and maim people if you wanted to. You can't really stealth your way around it sometimes. Like, killing the killing the zombies in the game is one thing because they're already dead, and they don't really place an emphasis on that. But like when it comes to the living NPCs, like maybe it's just because like people are so accustomed nowadays to like, you know, killing off a whole bunch of random NPCs. But the fact that they try to like do something by naming or by like having, you know, characters call out like, oh no, character name something whatever, like you're dead, where the fuck are they? Like, I get that probably happens, but at the same time it's not really like, how do I say this, like immersive, I think, like within the world. Like it just feels like a cool gimmick that like kind of loses its charm right away.
Is that a gimmick? To me, this just sounds like a strategy you'd use if you're trying to like do something with it and like make you question your choices.
Yeah. See, but it would make more sense if you had non-lethal options at that point. But as Gabe pointed out, there aren't any.
I mean, I don't know anything about this game, so
Yeah, it sounds like it's a video game with the illusion of choice. You don't actually have the choice but to kill these people, and then it makes you feel bad about them, but it never gives you that choice. It's like
It never gives you the
your-
option.
Yeah.
And then it has all these cutscenes where the player character is like so sad that of all the horrible stuff she's done, and it plays all these strings and it does all these like little cinematic things to try to make you, the audience, feel like, oh, I did a bad thing, but it didn't give you any other option. It sat you down, it strapped you to a chair, it put a gun in your hand, it duct taped your finger around the thing, and it made you shoot. And it was like, don't you feel bad? Don't you feel bad for the thing you did? You had a choice. It's like, I didn't have a choice.
It's even more ironic then because, like, Ellie is technically like feeling bad about killing the NPC, like the important characters, like important named characters as part of like, you know, as part of like the antagonist, quote unquote. But then like, it's as if she doesn't even acknowledge the killing that that she does to get to those players. Like she doesn't give a shit about everyone else, but when she gets to that one named character, then she gives a shit. And it's like, that's not consistent.
I don't know. This is just making me think of like Undertale, because like,
See, no, that's a good example of a game with choice.
yeah, because you can go like the genocide route or the pacifist route. That's what they're called, right? Or you can go somewhere in the middle. I think like you have your choices, but it's like when you like kill the characters, if you like make that decision, it actually feels bad. Like from what I know, I haven't actually played it. I've just like watched a few playthroughs, but like that's the vibe I've gotten. It's like if you actually kill the characters, like the game makes you feel bad for it because it's actually like a choice that you made.
And to, you know, go back to the topic of, you know, why should you like kill off a character? Like certainly if you have like, if you as a person who plays video games have the choice in that, like the decision that kind of like influences you to make such a hard decision to do should pay off, right? And like the thing when it comes to like killing off characters in general, as Marie-Soleil said earlier, is that it should feel, it should just make sense, right? Because if you're just killing off a character for no reason, then no one is going to appreciate that decision. Literally no one, right? Like they could be a horrible character, but if they don't go out, if if their death doesn't make any sense, then why? You're not gonna, it's not, can't even speak.
One of the reasons, I'm sorry, Alex, you can go.
I was just gonna say this is making me think of Stranger Things season 4 when Buddy Boy, what's his name?
Eddie.
No.
Season 4?
Chrissy?
Ow! The jock kid.
No.
Dumb fuck. No?
No.
Who else dies in that season?
A lot of people. But the dad, not dad, Papa. What's his name?
Oh, Papa.
Brenner.
Brenner.
Yeah.
His death pissed me off. Because he's a horrible character, and I've been wanting him to die for a long time, horribly painfully, and then they just he gets shot and then tries to redeem himself, and then they just linger over his dying body for way too long.
Yeah.
I felt like everything with Brenner. I feel like I'm late to the Stranger Things episode with this, with my Brenner comments. I can talk about this now. I feel like Brenner's death, everything surrounding it was so fucking contrived. It was ridiculous. I feel like number one, I feel like he died. He died. And see, I just rewatched season 1. He gets munched on. Dude is fucking dead, and then he's back. I don't feel like they thoroughly explained it with any sort of effort at all. How he was alive, how he is back. He's just back. And I felt like it was super contrived to have him just as the military are breaking into the facility, to have him put the collar onto 11 just so that he can take it off to be heroic. That was so stupid.
No, the whole Brenner plotline in season 4 pissed me off, but I feel like his death was not well done, and it was really unsatisfying, which when you have such a important antagonistic character like that, I mean, I still think Hopper should have killed him, but
So I haven't seen season 4, but it sounds like they tried to give a redemption arc in 4 minutes.
Yeah. And but it was they were trying to redeem him a little bit, but not enough to piss people off, because you had this whole thing where 11, he was 11, forgive me, and she didn't forgive him. But narratively he wasn't forgiven, but the way that scene was filmed, it felt like he had been redeemed.
Yeah. And the brothers Duff know what they're doing when they want to film a scene to convey what they want you to think. It doesn't matter what you think; they want you to think something.
Yeah.
So it felt like you were supposed to feel bad for him that 11 didn't forgive him, which I didn't, because he's a fucking piece of shit. But
exactly, yeah. On Stranger Things 2, their way of killing off characters is pretty much a meme at this point. You have characters who are introduced who people generally like, and when you have side characters that have really interesting potential development and relationships, nope, they're gone. And
I feel like Alexei lived out his purpose truly, but I feel like Eddie's death was such bullshit.
It was such bullshit. It his whole arc of oh, I'm running away from everything, but now I'm going to face everything head on. Great. Why did he need to die?
It didn't feel like they were in any danger of the bats. It didn't feel like he needed to actually do that at all.
Yeah.
I feel like in any movie where you have y'all seen Rogue One, I feel like that movie is all full of scenes where a character's I will hold the line, you guys go do the thing, and then they have to hold the line so that they can buy some time. But I didn't really feel like Eddie was. I don't think the show. I don't think it's crazy that in a 2.5 hour final episode, I don't think the show did enough. It had enough scenes of him or the bats or whatever, enough to convey to me that Steve, Robin, and Nancy were in danger of the bats going back to them. It didn't seem like it was necessary for him to do that at all.
Yeah. It's
no, that was stupid.
Yeah. And I think in season 4 too, when you're talking about characters the 3 others who died because of Vecna, you had Chrissy, and I'll just focus on Chrissy for now because I literally could not remember the other 2. Interesting development, really interesting character, potential good relationship with another introduced character, gone. Why?
See, I kind of disagree. I feel like Chrissy's death makes sense but that's just because I'm I'm like a big slasher fan. I feel like this season was trying to pay homage to a lot of slasher films, and Chrissy is like she's like a cheerleader. It's like a classic trope, you know. That's just who's got to die first if there is a slasher afoot. That made sense to me.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think, like, I mean, Chrissy's death is what, started the whole series. And, like, building her up, like, makes you actually, like, feel for her. I still don't like her death scene. I think they dragged it out way too long.
It's so fucked up.
It's horrifying.
Yeah.
But, like, her death did make sense for the story.
I mean, fair. I don't know. It's just like for me, it's just like I don't know if it like it's obviously not just a Stranger Things problem, but when a really interesting character is introduced, but they have to fit the narrative to die. Like that it doesn't feel right. And Chrissy's is like what the thing that I kind of refer back to, because like I can see, yeah, probably her story was kind of like outlived at that point. Like she fulfilled her role as like to kind of like push and like add the tension and like push the plot along, but at the same time it's like this could have been a really interesting development. And that's maybe just saying because like, there was a lot going for her. Like she was in like she had a really interesting relationship with Eddie, but also with fucking Jason. Yeah, like that could have been its own interesting thing, like during the development of the series. And
yes, but I think that's the point. Like you're supposed to be like, oh wow, she had so much potential. It's horrible that she died.
And I
feel like if the alternative is that the series arc of that season was a love triangle between Eddie and Jason, not only would I prefer her death, I would prefer my own.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but in season 1 and season 2 of Stranger Things, after Barb dies, Nancy is searching for answers about this. Even into season 2, I think that's when her and Jonathan go off to find that one reporter dude and talk to him, and that's when they like come up with that story, isn't it? Or is that the end of season 1?
No, that's in season 2.
Okay. I feel like Barb's death was done well. It showed like she wasn't she was a main-ish character, a secondary character, so to speak. And it showed the impact it had on her friends, on her family. They didn't just, oh, Barb's dead. Goodbye, Barb.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like it's something that continues on even after like they have the resolution of like exposing her death to like her parents. Like there's still scenes even later where I think there were scenes in seasons 3 and 4 where Nancy like looked up and saw someone and she was like Barb, but it wasn't. And like I mean, in season 4, there's a scene where she's literally in the place where Barb died, and like overwhelmed by like the guilt,
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something that has impact like throughout the rest of the series on Nancy as a character. And I think yeah, they handled it mostly well. I still feel like in the first season it felt weird, but they do like handle it very well like throughout it.
Mm-hmm.
His death was like I feel very unnecessary in Stranger Things. Fucking Bob.
I mean, they weren't gonna be able to keep Sean Astin.
Why not? Yeah.
You know why?
That was like I felt like that was like ridiculous though. That was such like a. I just
like, show his death in like slow motion or something.
They did, yeah. They showed him get like fucking mauled in slow motion. It was horrible.
Yeah,
there was no reason for it.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And I feel like legitimately, I feel like Bob could have had like an interesting role in the story going forward
for probably another season at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I like him for Joyce a lot more than Hopper.
Controversial.
Is that controversial?
From a lot of people's point of view, yeah.
Probably.
But I agree.
probably. I like Joyce with Hopper. Just real quick on this, I like Joyce with Hopper, but yeah, like Bob was good, and yeah, he definitely could have had like a really interesting. I don't know, like he's, and again another really quick thing, like Bob, for all of the shit that Joyce was going through in season 2 and like, you know, up until season 2, like Bob was a nice like anchor. Which, considering everything that happens in season 3, he could have very well had like a good presence in. He doesn't need like a lot of very good character, like he doesn't need like a very thorough character arc. He can just be like the kind, supportive anchor character for Joyce, and that's great.
Yeah, I do think that they milked his death way too much, but they tend to do that a lot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, see,
I
we've
feel
got
like-
a couple of. Oh, sorry, Gabe. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say one more thing on Stranger Things. I feel the whole reason I didn't watch this season until like way after. I was like, if Steve dies in this season, I do not watch it. That's final. That's my. And if the next season, I'm gonna wait like a week out until after it comes out. Because if Steve dies in season 5, I don't watch it. End of story. Page 1.
We will watch it and tell you if Steve dies.
Tell me if Steve dies. I will. That
I
will
don't
be.
think they'll kill Steve off.
No,
They can't kill
I
Steve
don't think
off. I
they'll
feel.
kill Steve or Nancy or Jonathan or any of like the main four.
Yeah, they're not going to
five
kill any
younger
of their main cast. They're not going to do that. They
Yeah.
They
could
could kill off Mike.
They could
could
kill
kill
Mike
off Mike
and
off.
Jonathan, and I wouldn't complain.
Yeah.
But they're not going to.
Mm-hmm.
We know they're not going to kill off Mike because they want to give 11 a happy ending. I'm sure of it.
Ugh. He's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Which again is not Finn Wolfhard's fault. Anyway, I was gonna say, like, Marie-Soleil, if you don't mind changing topics, we have 2 interesting places that we can go off of, at least.
I don't mind changing topics. What were your thoughts? What were your points that you wanted to move to?
Graphic deaths and last stands, or last stands. And I don't know where to think. I don't know if that's like
I've already
interesting.
made my statement or my opinion on graphic deaths pretty clear.
Yeah, I feel like we can talk about both of those. I feel like we all, at least the majority of us are on the same boat on graphic deaths.
I am not.
Yeah, we know.
That's why I said majority.
So do we want to talk about graphic deaths?
Yeah, we
Say
can go
on it,
graphic
I just
deaths
like it.
and then last stands.
Okay.
I don't like graphic deaths. If they're gonna be done, they have to be done like very well and very specifically. But generally speaking, I don't like them. They just feel like they're like milking it and trying to make you feel shocked or sad or horrified. They just feel manipulative to me most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm like how I feel about graphic deaths is pretty much the same thing. Like you can I'm certainly not saying that you should just let gravity decide the fate of all of your characters. Don't do that. But if your character is dying in such a very gruesome, specific way, you do not need to show it. Like it, in the case with Stranger Things and Bob specifically, like if he is going to be getting eaten alive by demodogs, you don't need to show that. Just like cut away to like the reactions, which is completely fine. Right? You get the point across and you don't have to have it be so disgusting because that's already fucked up.
I am not a fan of gore in any shape or form. So if you're going to have a graphic death, it has to be done very well for me to say it's a good graphic death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It has to be done very well. And it's not exactly the act of the death, the graphic death that needs to be done well, but the other characters' reactions to it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because somebody's not going to watch their friend get torn to pieces and then just walk away like it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sure, let's go to prom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a simple mind. I feel like I have there's something about, I feel like with horror specifically, I feel like I think a problem I have with a lot of graphic death and stuff is like when it gets to be like this the shit that's like trying to be super real and like grounded. I feel like that can be like pretty upsetting. I don't really want to see like a very realistic graphic death. I don't want to see someone get like eviscerated in a way that like looks really real. But I feel like in like if it manages to be like, I feel like graphic deaths in anime are so over the top and so like bombastic in their graphicness that it almost feels like the shock value has like gone around and come back to like being almost, I feel like if you pump up the graphicness to a certain amount, it becomes like almost like morbid humor almost. I feel like there's some anime that's a good example of this, and I can't think of any examples at the moment. But like,
well, there's certainly. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I feel like most 80s horror, especially 80s horror sequels, played on like morbid humor, and I feel like if you're trying to do that, you gotta go graphic. And I feel like there's some graphic deaths and stuff that are like that both manage to be super graphic and super shocking, but also not super graphic and play on like imagination. I think my favorite is the classic. I won't go super into detail for your sake, Alex. But Johnny Depp's death in Nightmare on Elm Street. Have y'all seen Nightmare on Elm Street?
No.
No.
Okay, it's like the iconic Nightmare. Basically, Johnny Depp, he's sleeping on a waterbed. He gets sucked into the waterbed, and then a blood fountain comes out of the waterbed. That's it. Super graphic, but like you don't see how he dies. A lot of that's left up to the imagination, and it's just this very violent imagery. It sticks in your brain, and it sticks. But I feel like it does it in a way that is creative. I feel like that's what it is. I feel like that's what it is with like graphic death for me. Is I feel like some of the shit that's trying to be too realistic gets like, it's just like that's just trying to be shocking. But I feel like if someone's being super creative, that's almost like I can get into that. Like that's like enjoyable. Mm-hmm. If someone's being super creative, especially if it's like, if it doesn't look real, then like it's not like, I don't know. I feel like I can detach myself from the graphicness of it and just like enjoy some creativity.
And like that's the thing too, right? Like I agree with you because horror in its state, like, you know, by definition is just meant to be really like grotesque and horrifying. And slasher films, at least, or you know, the ones that I've seen are like campy, morbid fun. Like the ways that like these serial killers think, like, you know, like the way that these serial killers like, you know, essentially off their victims, like because it's already within the essence of, you know, like a mass murderer, it kind of makes sense to have like not overly graphic deaths, but just like you know, they're dead, like, you know, it's a scream, knife in their chest, they're dead, that's it. It kind of changes though then when it depends on context. Like Stranger Things, for example, like Stranger Things is filled with a whole bunch of stuff. Like there's relationships, there's comedy, there's a lot of seriousness, tension. There's so much going on. Having an absolutely graphic death like with Bob's is too much. And I think the other example that I would like to, you know, in terms of like unnecessarily graphic death is The Walking Dead. I don't know how much it's changed since I stopped watching it, but the early seasons of The Walking Dead had some disgustingly graphic like murder or disgustingly graphic deaths on screen, like whether it was from the zombies or whether it was from like actual people themselves. And again, I won't go into specifics, but just at that point it's just too much. Right? Like I get it, it's a zombie apocalypse. It's meant to kind of establish like, you know, lawlessness and whatever, but at the same time, you don't need to be showing these things, because like killing off a character already is pretty shocking, but going into detail about it is it's just straight too much.
The Walking Dead is one of those, it's such a weird, like, I get it's a zombie apocalypse, and it goes back to like the pointless deaths though too. Like, I vaguely, like, I remember watching after they escape the prison and there's the bus from the prison, and Maggie's just like killing the zombie after zombie that comes through, and none of it matters to her because none of them are Glenn. But you've been living with these people at the prison for how long? And you don't, like, we don't know their names, the audience doesn't know their names, but you think that would impact the characters in the show, but it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
And I know it's not quite on the gory death and such, but still.
Yeah. It feels like just with, you know, as with the kind of overall thing, like death has to have some kind of purpose when it comes to storytelling, and at that point, graphic deaths, like, to me, like, it feels very akin to when someone is trying to write a sex scene. If it starts being more specific than just the general point, you're already crossing it a bit too much.
I feel like that's a great comparison.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, because if you're writing like a sex scene, but it's like an important character or it's two important characters, then the tasteful thing is like to, you know, cut away, imply, use the audience's imagination. But if you're trying to be raunchy and you're trying to be provocative, then as with violence and as with like a sex scene, you just fucking go off, just fucking like you go nuts, and it almost reaches a point with both where, like, if you like just like go overboard to a certain limit, it almost becomes like comedic.
Yeah.
Yep. It needs to fit the story. It needs to fit the genre.
It needs to fit the tone, especially. Well, you know, it also needs to fit the tone too, because like, if everything up until this point, like, if these two characters like are very, very, very like, you know, if two characters like really want to kill each other or really want to fuck each other, then you can probably specify. But if there's all this other shit going on and then they just have like incredibly graphic, like, violent fight scenes or an incredibly graphic sex scene, it just doesn't make any sense at that point, because at that point you're not writing it to the character, you're writing it for yourself, which in this context is not a good thing, right? Like, you know, as we talked about in previous episodes, yeah, obviously, you know, write for yourself, it's what you do, but at the same time, consider how much of it you are giving to your audience, because, you know, as Alex had pointed out, like, at that point, your book or your story doesn't become synonymous with, you know, with its like compelling characters or with its like awesome plot or whatever. Like, people will remember it as like, holy shit, this character died so gruesomely, or holy shit, like these characters had a really, really like specific quote unquote like sex scene. It's like, is that really what you want your legacy to be? Like, the one who goes overboard rather than, who goes overboard on one specific thing rather than making everything else work.
No, I feel like it depends on the creator. I mean, I feel like some people, like, you know, like George Romero and John Carpenter have sort of made like a legacy for themselves off of being guys who like went incredibly overboard with violence and like making like just grotesque imagery. I mean, I feel like John Carpenter especially is like sort of iconic for that. Yeah, I definitely feel like he's probably pretty happy with his legacy.
And that was maybe, you know, kind of shocking at first to begin with, but you know, as their legacy and influence kind of grew, like, yeah, it's synonymous with them at that point that you kind of expect these things. But, you know, at the same time, if it's unfamiliar to you, then, you know, if it's not...
they're also going to be like really acquired taste kind of things.
Yeah.
I think like they're not gonna be like
Oh, totally.
you can go overboard with your death, but it's definitely going to like isolate your work from a greater audience. And if you're okay with it, then that's fine. But I think that's just something that writers should keep in mind if they're interested in having very gory death scenes. Is a lot of people don't like reading that, and so you're gonna get like a lot less interest in your story as a result.
You're going to be facing a niche market.
Yeah.
I think the thing for me with niches though is that like I feel like sometimes it's kind of like it's like a good thing to like have tapped into that, because I feel like you are going to alienate some people, but the people that you don't alienate are gonna fucking love it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And there's talking about gory deaths. There's also like if the death itself isn't like overtly gory, but then like something happens to the body afterwards, like people could call like Lethal Weapon, for example, when after John McClane kills a guy and then props the body up in the elevator and writes across his chest or his shirt something. I can't remember what he writes.
It's something like now I have a gun, ho ho ho.
Yeah. Or when he like throws a body out of a window or something to get the attention of the police. Some people could consider that slightly graphic. Because like technically mutilation or abuse of a corpse.
Yeah.
But in action flicks, that kind of stuff works for the action flick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I think it's just very genre dependent.
Yeah.
And like tone dependent, and like, you know, who your audience is. It has to be done well, and it has to be done in like the right contexts for it to work.
I feel like the unfortunate thing as well with movies especially is I feel like graphic death was a thing that was like a lot more doable. No, I'm not to be like a oh, it's a good old day, but like I feel like in the 80s, I feel like you could get away with a lot. Not get away with, but like I feel like if you did like a graphic death, there was always like sort of an aspect of unreality to it because it never looked real. Like it was always in that David Cronenberg movie, I can't remember the name of it. Scanners, the guy's head explodes. The iconic shot of the guy's fucking head exploding, and it's like you look at it and you're like, oh, that's a horrible image of a guy's head exploding. But then but in like some part of your brain, you're like, that's like a paper mache balloon that someone's blowing up with some dynamite. That is very obviously paper mache that is being blown up. That does not look like a head. That's that or like just stuff like that. I feel like there was always like a bit of unreality to it, and I feel like as movies have gone into more like being realistic, I think a lot of gore and violence it just gets like, I don't know, it sort of loses like, I feel like even the appeal of like being over the top, because it's just kind of upsetting to look at now. And I feel like a lot of like stuff that's trying to be realistic and serious when it is gory it just comes off as distasteful.
Yeah.
Special effects have come a long way.
What is the
part of that is I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Part of with special effects though is that they were seeing how realistic can we get this to look. And a lot of the times they got awards for that. They got praise for that, for how realistic they made things look with special effects, with CGI. And now we're at the time where it's like, where's too much? Where you draw the line?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, to go back a bit in time, I think of this, like, Gabe, you were mentioning about how, like, and you know, kind of within context, is it takes to consider, like, you know, in horror, it makes sense to have a bit more, like, over-the-top, disgusting deaths. It doesn't make sense, though, in a big budget, like, treasure hunter movie, cough cough Indiana Jones, where
disagree. Those are Nazis. You can do whatever you want to. and I will
Okay,
not
well,
complain.
fair enough.
You want their faces? Beautiful. Poetic.
Fair
even.
enough. Like, and absolutely, you should just burn Nazis. But at the same time, like, it was a very
Fucking
graphic
glorious.
considering the movie or thing. It was very graphic. I'd say, again.
Well,
like,
again, that does like the thing where it's like you look at like the guy's head melting in Indiana Jones, and the immediate part of your brain is like, this is a guy's face melting. What a gruesome sight. But like, I feel like in the part of your brain that controls like traumatic memories and stuff, unless you see that when you're like very very little and like you can't like distinguish this stuff. If you see that as like an adult, if you watch that scene might like gross you out, but in the back of your brain, you're gonna be like, that is a big candle that they have shaped into a skull, and they put a fire over it or under it, and they sped up the footage of it melting. I think that's actually how they did that. But like, it just looks like that. So I think like the brain goes, this is okay, and then like it's an impressive effect. And I feel like nowadays, if you have a scene where a guy's face melts, I don't think I have seen any movie with a guy's face melting in modern day. I cannot think of an example, but if you had it, it would look way too real, and it would look way too like it would be like fucked up looking. It would be like I gotta look away. Like this is fucked up. Like this is
yeah.
And I feel like the sort of like filmmaking person in me is just always, I look at like movies from the 70s and 80s where they do shit like that, and I'm always like, how the fuck did they do this? And then I want to research it, and I want to look it up, and I want to like, it's just that's just so impressively like, I'm pretty sure they like actually built a candle in the shape of like a guy's head, and just like it's just wild shit.
Oh, God. Yeah, case in point, just like it's a lot. It can be a lot, and yeah, it depends on the context.
So I feel like that line there, it depends on the context, summarizes everybody's feelings on gory death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Prefer not to watch them, but since they're the staples of certain genres, I just don't watch those genres.
So Dean wanted to talk about Last Stands. Are we good to move on to Last Stands then?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you have a Last Stand type in mind, Dean?
Well, when I'm thinking of, like, I don't have one specifically in mind, but we all know what a last stand is. It's like, you know, I don't even need to describe it, but for people who don't, it's when your character is just really compelled by bravery. They were like, I'm gonna fight off this entire fucking army by myself, and so you guys can get away. And now that I'm saying that, like, the one that comes to mind is Eddie's in Stranger Things season 4. So his last stand, as well as all other last stands, is inherently a very, how do I say this, dramatic plot device. Like, the bravery of thing, like, you know, and I certainly can't speak for other people, but the bravery for one person to like take on everything is a lot, especially if it's like, you know, whether it's like upside down bats or whether it's like 100 soldiers or anything like that. Like, it in storytelling, it just feels like a really, 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 really big moment. And usually those last stands kill off your character. And where, you know, and I wanted to talk about last stands because, like, that's also pretty divisive. Like, does it work? Does it not work? It certainly makes sense. Like, with the case of Eddie from Stranger Things, like, his character arc made sense to have like a last stand. It was kind of dumb that they had it against bats, but nevertheless, like, he ran away, or he was like, quote unquote, running away like throughout his character arc. But like, now that he's taking like a final stand, it like shows that he's brave. It shows that he's like overcoming all of that, and it makes sense, right?
I think so. And like, another last stand that more people might be familiar with is Gandalf. Yeah. Gandalf standing on the bridge, knocking down the bridge so the Fellowship can run. And yes, Gandalf it does come back, and I want to talk about resurrection at some point in this episode. But like the idea of a character sacrificing and giving up everything to allow somebody else to escape, to allow somebody else to get away, is a very old idea. The sacrificial play, the last stand, it's a very old idea I don't think we're ever going to see the end of it.
Yeah.
No.
It's also one of those ones that it can be done really, really well and like very emotionally. Like I think Lord of the Rings is a good example of one that I think is like well done and like emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also be done in ways that are just like, really, that's stupid. But I mean, like Eddie's death, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Lord of the Rings does it in a couple different ways too. Like you could consider Boromir's death a last stand too. Like he goes to fight the encroaching army so that Frodo can escape. And Merry and Pippin technically also charge at this army as well. They don't die, but they are captured.
Mm-hmm. See, yeah, Boromir's is a good example of a last stand too, because he overcame his own temptation to, secure the ring for the good, for all of men and for himself, and instead chose to go out swinging. And that's a really good thing. That not only develops his character, but also it just makes sense, basically, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, Lord of the Rings does a really good job with its last stands. So
even at the very end of it, there's the last stand where Aragorn leads the army of men to the gates of Mordor, and they don't die, but that still is a last stand, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Believe so, yeah.
There's a lot of last stands.
I mean,
very common trope.
Yeah. Well, the one that kind of pops into my head now is I'm pretty sure we've all heard of the 300 Spartans before in one way or another, right?
Wait, what?
The 300 Spartans who stood guard and protected against the invading Persian army.
Yeah.
You mean the movie 300?
Yeah, so the movie 300, but that was also based off of I don't know how legitimate that actual story is, but yeah,
it's not.
It's not. Okay. So let's talk about
vaguely based in actual history, but very vaguely. Very
vaguely. Okay. So
very Mark Millardly and then very Zack Snyderly.
Okay, so let me talk really quick about 300. 300 Spartans against thousands upon thousands of Persian soldiers. Yeah, that counts as the last stand. It shows the valor of the Spartan people, and it shows the strength of an entire nation against another, and in that way it kind of adds it kind of makes sense for all of that to happen. But at the same time, 300 was one of those examples where it's 300 specifically, with all of the with all of the all of the Spartan soldiers and just without any kind of armor whatsoever, a lot of the slow motion, that's where it just gets so fortuitous, too much, I think. And that's what makes it just I don't know, last stands, when it makes sense, as is a lot of what we've been talking about tonight, when it makes sense, adds so much to the character, but when it doesn't make sense, it's just for show.
I feel like in any piece of fiction, when there is a last stand, I feel like I have to care about the character. And in the case of 300, I don't.
Oh, I don't care for anyone either.
I also feel with last stands, it kind of cheapens it if the person that had the last stand gets resurrected or brought back from the dead.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Their sacrifice means nothing if you bring them back.
Yeah.
Like, the one example that comes to mind is, at least in the books, The Vampire Diaries. I do not know how the TV show went. I did not watch the entire TV show. I watched like 3 episodes of it. But in the books, after Elena is turned into a vampire, there is a scene where her, Stefan, and Damon are all trapped by Catherine, I think.
Don't remember. It's been too long.
The vampire woman who turned Damon and Stefan at one point. Like,
Catherine. I'm pretty sure that was Catherine.
I think it's Catherine, yeah. Well, Catherine's got them all trapped, and she is slowly torturing them, and Elena jumps and shoves her into the sunlight, killing the both of them. It's a nice sacrificial play. The next book, she's dead in the next book, and the story is told from the other character's point of view. Only they are communing with her ghost throughout it, and at the end of the book, she comes back to life with special powers.
Because of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that just cheapens the whole thing. Like, at least in my opinion, it cheapens her whole death and everything.
Yeah. Because by its name alone, last stands are conclusive. Like, if you're going, like, if your character is, and to me, like, if your character is going to, like, do a last stand, this is the end of their character arc. There's really no coming, like, there shouldn't be any coming back from this, because they're likely going to die. And if they somehow get brought back from that, and we'll probably talk more about, we're going to elaborate more on this in Resurrections, like, because Last Stands, as I said, just feels so conclusive, like, why then think, like, what else do you do with that then? Like, like, their death would influence everyone else, but, like, they themselves as a character are done.
It feels like the author killed off this character because they didn't know how else to resolve that story arc, and then realized, hey, I need this character to fulfill a different story arc, so I'm just gonna bring them back with some magic-y, wishy-washy bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, that is what that seems like.
Mm-hmm. And that's maybe you think, like, that's teasing Resurrection, but yeah, just for my final points on Last Stands, yeah, because it's so much, for lack of a better word, just like, because again, it's so conclusive, like, this has to be the end for your character, and everything before it and everything after it has to essentially be wrapped up, because if you're just if your character gets to this last stand, but there's no justification in place, it's not going to feel as, like, impactful and as emotional as it should be.
I also think this kind of relates to something that Gabe and I talked about a while ago, which is the redeeming sacrifice. Like, when a character, like, sacrifices themselves in order to, like, redeem themselves. And how a very, very overused trope, often done poorly.
I feel like I said something in that conversation. I, like, had an example.
You had a lot of examples, but I don't remember what they were.
And I can't think of a single one. God damn it! Why weren't we recording? I was like, we were ringing off good shit. I can't think of a single one.
Yeah, but yeah, so, like, it's really common to have, like, a character that, like, needs to be redeemed, and then, like, I think in a lot of ways having them sacrifice themselves, like, cheapens it. And it's like an easy way out, it's like, oh, I protected someone with my life, that's it, I'm done. And instead of, like, the character having to actually work towards a proper redemption,
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting conversation, yeah, redeeming sacrifice. Like, you yeah, like redemption too in itself is a long process. Not everyone will forgive you so immediately, and certainly not after your death either. Like that shit sticks with people for quite a while, and in storytelling it feels very I don't want to say inauthentic because when you have worlds full of like monsters and gods, like you don't really you have to suspend your disbelief already, but just on the basis of like empathy and understanding, redemption takes a long time, and to suddenly just have this one awful character that no one likes, but suddenly at the very end, oh, they're killing themselves for everyone else, when there's been no visible sign of any kind of redemption whatsoever. Like very last minute redemption too, that's just stupid.
I feel like redemption sacrifices can be done well if it's not like a truly heinous character. I feel like the best times where it's been done is if it's like a character who's like a little bit fiendish, but like whether or not they're like good or evil has always been in question. And like I'm like building it. I feel like my a really solid example is like Greed in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I feel like his sort of redemptive sacrifice at the end was like, I feel like that was done well, because I'd always felt like he was like a villain, to be sure, but not necessarily evil. Just sort of like a he was just sort of like just trouble almost. Less not really out to like cause harm. He's just like just a fucking troublemaker, and then he redeems himself at the end, and sort of like redeems himself. I feel like that's like the other thing. I feel like a lot of like what you were saying, Dean. I feel like a lot of redemption arcs sort of like use the sacrifice as a.
It's like okay, let's
as the
redemption. Yeah.
Yeah, whereas like it has to be earned.
It's a cheap way to get feels without doing any work.
Yeah,
and I feel like likewise with Brotherhood, I feel like there's a lot of examples of characters who were trying to redeem themselves from their like actually horrible things that they did throughout the story, like Mustang and like Scar, and neither of them die at the end. They have their lives at the end, and end of the story is them being like, okay, I'm now gonna. Y'all have seen Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, right? I did not just like.
Not me, but go on.
Okay, I'll be vaguer.
It's okay. Keep talking. I'm okay.
Good. You gotta watch it. But they're basically like, okay, well we're alive now. We lived through that horrible battle, and we're now gonna keep going with our redemption. It's the best kind of ending to a character's arc, where it doesn't end. It keeps going, but like they can't really write a story about it, so it just implications, the beautiful little implications.
Yeah, and like the nice thing about those examples is like, they've done terrible stuff and they have to live with that. Whereas it's like I said, I think sometimes using like sacrifice as redemption is a way of like the characters escaping the bad things that they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never get the impression in all of Brotherhood that either Mustang or Scar will ever like not be guilty about the shit that they did during the war.
Yeah.
And like that's like that in itself is like, the after, when it comes to redemption, like that you're basically like adding more to a character than you previously could have thought of, like how like atoning for their mistakes, reconciling with everyone else. Like people love hearing that. Like they love seeing, like that's why people talk about Zuko so much whenever they're talking about reforming villains or redeeming villains. Like it's his personality that comes out after his redemption, and like how that meshes with the good guys. Like people want to see that. You don't need to sacrifice your characters to get like, to redeem them. Right?
Well, I feel like Zuko is very like he was never. He doesn't die, but he was very. This is like a little, but I feel like he was very. He was never villainous. He was troubled.
Well, antagonistic
with
then.
A terrible father.
He was a bad guy, but he wasn't a bad guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I said this during like the Avatar episode, so I'm just gonna repeat what I said. Where I feel like what really works about his redemption arc is that it feels like it never does the thing in a lot of fiction where a character just starts out as a villain and then they have a redemption arc. I feel like from square one, from that first fight with the general guy whose name I couldn't remember in that episode and I can't remember now. I'm just yeah, that guy. In his first fight with that guy, I feel like from like square one, you're rooting for Zuko to eventually go good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I also just, like, he's a troubled teenager with a shitty dad, so can you blame any of his actions?
Yeah.
But I guess, like, if you want to say he is an antagonist in the first 2 seasons of the show, he's a good antagonist because you understand why he's doing what he's doing. And you're rooting for him to get out of his bad situation from the start.
The moment he starts to learn that what he thought he knew isn't the truth, he starts to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember which video I saw this from, but it was there's a certain line that characters I don't know if it is just coming from this one single video, but like certainly like there is, when it comes to your antagonist or when it comes to like characters in general, there's a point of no return. And when you cross that point of no return for your character, like redeeming themselves from that takes a long time. Like, if you even want to redeem your character in the first place, if you want them to live and die as a villain, you certainly can't do that. But redemption? Like, it should, redemption, as we've been talking about, takes a long time. Like, and to talk about an example that we had been talking already earlier, like Brenner's death had been awful. Like, Brenner had been awful from his introduction all the way up until his death. And the half-assed attempt at trying to redeem him at the very end will forever make him, like, no one is going to think, oh yeah, he redeemed himself. Some people are just going to think, why didn't he die worse?
He didn't do anything. He was a horrible character.
Yeah, so, like, at that point, like people might just think, like, is this it? Or why didn't he die worse? Or why did he die at all? Or, why didn't he just stay dead? Right?
Yep. But it feels like we are moving off of Last Stands and into why did I forget the word? We were literally just talking about it.
Redemption?
Thank you. Redemption. And we can totally do a podcast on redemption. I think that would be cool. But we should move back to death. Do we have any more points on Last Stands from anybody?
No.
Okay, then, since we were talking a lot about resurrection just now, do we want to move on to that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been vague on it. I don't like resurrection.
See, I think it can be done well. It depends how it's done. I mean, that's my opinion on a lot of things. I think pretty much anything can be done well. Even like the things I hate the most. But like it has to be done in well. Okay, the one that comes to mind that I'm thinking of is like Buffy, where like I felt like they handled Buffy's resurrection well, in that like it was traumatizing for her and like for everyone else. And it wasn't just like brushed aside. You know, like I feel like a lot of times when people do resurrection stories, they're like, I mean, we could talk about Supernatural in juxtaposition, where the characters die and come back to life pretty much in every season, and it's just kind you know, at a certain point, it became a meme because it happened so often, and it's just kind of like, oh, whose turn is it to die next? And it's just kind of like hand waved away every time. And you know, sometimes they tried to do something interesting with it, but most of the time they're just like, they're back to the same old stuff. Woo!
Yeah,
You know,
it's
that's
just
bad writing. That's a bad way to handle resurrection.
yeah.
But yeah, but because it's like, you know, something like that happening is extremely serious. I mean, like dying and then coming back to life, like traumatic experience.
Yeah. And
Yep.
my opinion is, I think, more akin to like Marie-Soleil's. I have yet to think of like a resurrection that kind of made me like enjoy, I've yet to find a resurrection that I kind of liked. Like certainly, and some people may argue like, oh, you know, if a character is like dies and then they're brought back to life like near a sec, like that that's like a very dramatic plot device, but at the same time, like your character is dead for only a few seconds. I think when it comes to like they've been dead for like a good while, but then suddenly they're just resurrected out of nowhere. As Alex pointed out, like death is permanent. Death should be just completely like definitive. Like if you're gone, you're gone. So the whole thing of bringing a character back to life, like it, beloved character or not, if a character is resurrecting, there has to be more serious implications to that than there were before. Like there's no way that you could think of anything normal at that point.
Death needs to have consequences. It needs to carry weight. If
Yeah, well, yeah, and sorry, Marissa, go ahead.
if it's common enough in your book or your show or whatever, your story, that when characters die, you feel like they're going to come back. There's no emotional outlet at a death. If like, and Alex brought up Buffy, which is actually a good example of it because they don't do resurrection very often. Buffy dies and comes back twice, and both times it impacts her, both her mental health and her relationships with the people around her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then there are some, like there's the House of Night book series that I read in high school, and I still have all of the books. And it's like in every book a character dies, and then the majority of them, I want to say 80% of the people that die in it come back to life in some way, shape, or form. There's even a point where like, so in the House of Night books, if you're marked to be a vampire, that doesn't mean you're going to be a vampire. You have to fulfill the change, and you might fail at it and die. There is a scene where Zoe is telling somebody as they are failing the change, hey, this might not mean that you're dying. Some people come back from this here at our school.
Oh my god.
Wow.
Which just removes any of the worry that these guys have over not completing their change and dying.
Yeah.
There's also a high amount of people at that school with special abilities that die, but that is not related to this topic.
Mm-hmm. And
I feel like the only stories where like resurrection is like can be done in a way where like the stakes aren't lost is like a Groundhog Day story where it's like where it's like a part of the plot and where like it's almost like it becomes like this sort of reverse of it where it's like everything that you just said I think is true about a Groundhog Day story because when they're like if it's something like Edge of Tomorrow or like
I was gonna say
or like Groundhog Day or like All You Need Is Kill, which I fucking love All You Need Is Kill. If it's something like that, then it becomes almost like the fact that they're not dying, and that becomes like this sort of like this like wraparound consequence, and like this like by virtue of how much resurrection is story. The story has consequences again because this motherfucker is just like desperately trying to die.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that shit can be bad entertaining.
And
I also think that it is possible to kind of have like resurrection be a stakes in some way. I don't really know how to expand on this thought, but I do think it is possible to have like, you know, the idea of someone coming back to life be like raise the stakes in some way, because it's like, you know, if this person can come back to life, who else can come back to life?
Well, the villain comes back to life. That's
yeah.
I mean, if it's done well, again, if it's done well, it
Yeah.
has to be done well, which is very hard to do. Star Wars, but
I feel like this is less of a writing thing, more of like sorry. Yeah, you continue. I'm sorry.
no, I think it's something that can be done, and I think like in a way you can also do the like someone comes back but they don't come back right thing, which, you know, kind of leans into vampires or like zombie stories. Or even just like, you know, they come back but there's something wrong with it. I mean, I guess like I can even say like Supernatural did this in some ways with like Soulless Sam or Demon Dean.
Or like Pet Sematary.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that, so I won't comment. But yeah, like I think like that kind of stuff can also be really interesting.
Yeah, because
like what are the or alternatively, fucking hubris. What are the consequences of fucking with death and the natural cycle of life? You know?
Yeah,
I feel like this is less of like a narrative thing. This is more of like a game thing. Again. But like I just off the heels of like we just did the Elden Ring episode, so I just have a lot of Elden Ring shit in my brain, and I feel like especially with like some of the way that like I feel like in regards to villain resurrection, I feel like it can be very very impactful for if you're playing it or if you're just seeing it in a story. Although I can't think of examples where this has been done in a narrative, but if you have your character just fucking going through it trying to kill this big bad, and then they do it seemingly, and then the big bad like sort of just like brushes it off their shoulder like fuck you, that's nothing, fuck you bud, come back here. I feel like that could be I feel like villain resurrection can be kind of horrifying in situations like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or like, you know, if the villain isn't quite human, and this is like the way that they realize that like they kill the villain but they come back and you're just like, what are you, you know, that moment of dread.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like there are a lot of good ways that resurrection can be used, and you guys were taking a few minutes to, you know, like praise it, and certainly like Edge of Tomorrow and like Edge of Tomorrow, like having recently seen it, is a really good example of that, because there are still stakes. Like you're reliving the same thing over and over and over again, and that's fucked in and of itself. But at the same time, your character, when they're experiencing a time loop, learns, right? Or at least you're hoping that they do. And in that case, resurrection as a plot device can work, so long as your character is learning from it. If you're just bringing back your character without any kind of reason, then like why did you kill them off in the first place? And
you don't have a story in that case if it's like a Groundhog Day thing.
Yeah, and like with the case of Supernatural too, like you had interesting like concepts when it came to like Soulless Sam and Demon Dean, but those two died. Yeah, like those two died so often, like more often than you would even kind of think, that like what the fuck was the point of them dying in the like what the fuck was them like dying at all, really, if they're just going to be brought back somehow, right? Like yes, there may be something new like as part of it, but you kind of figure after watching like what 6-7 seasons of it that they're just going to come back. So in that case, like resurrection, like death, you know, obviously has to think. It obviously has to, you know, work. But I think when it comes to resurrection, the character or the characters around that character have to have changed.
Oh yeah,
'Cause-
no, that's exactly my point. Like
Yeah.
it can't just be like you can't just bring someone back to life and have nothing change. Like that it needs to have some impact on the story. It needs to happen for a reason, and it needs to have consequences. You know, death has to have consequences, resurrection also has to have consequences. Otherwise, it just feels like, I don't know, Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
what's the point of thing? Like what's the point of stakes at all if your character is going to literally overcome death? Like if death can't even stop them, like what can, right?
I
Yeah.
feel like Gandalf is a really good example of this because like when he does come back, he's like a completely different character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's also like he's not quite a main character.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
To be fair, it's not like it's Sam that dies or Frodo that dies and comes back.
Yeah.
Gandalf he's a mentor and a guide, so sort of, but he's a secondary character.
Yeah.
Mhm. And yeah, like
I
that's
feel
the
like you
thing.
absolutely can't do resurrection on like a main character. I don't think I can think of like other than the Groundhog Day thing. I don't think I can think of like a other than like Princess Bride, but that's more. I think that's like played for laughs. That's different. I feel like in
Yeah,
like
and
a
that's the, I mean, okay, Buffy is what you should be thinking of.
Buffy, yeah.
But second of all, yes, I do think resurrection can work for a good comedy. Like I have a very funny comedy or I think it's funny that like revolves around like death and resurrection. But it's like, again, that's just context. Does it work in this context, you know?
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, like Edge of Tomorrow is a good way of like, you know, like of a time loop or like Groundhog Day for a protagonist, because they are still very much at the center of everything, and it's their choices and it's their decisions that influence the plot moving forward while still having stakes. Because, you know, spoilers for people who haven't seen Edge of Tomorrow, you kind of don't need to, but it's okay. You don't really need spoilers. Once you kind of get it, you get it. But basically just like they introduce this like the consequences of the time loop being taken away, right? So it's not one constantly it's not just one constant montage of Tom Cruise dying over and over and over. Like he learns, he improves, he maps everything out, and that plays into the narrative of the story. Or that just plays into the narrative of what it just like it plays into the narrative, and there are still stakes. Like if he bleeds out and the blood is taken out of him, that's a good thing. Like that, like going from a Groundhog Day to back to real life, very interesting. And that's the same thing with Outer Wilds, which I'm surprised we haven't talked about, because Outer Wilds is a constant loop until suddenly it's not. And when you are dead in Outer Wilds, like you'll be back. But in that final stretch of the game where you only have one shot, if you don't do it, like if you fuck up, you fuck up and you're dead completely. There's no going back from that. I don't know, did I make any sense? Does that make sense, Gabe? You're the only one who's played Outer Wilds. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like the last little bit of Outer Wilds is very nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Because, like, resurrection, if used in a Groundhog Day where your character is being brought back to life over and over again, like, if that is what you've established until suddenly that's taken away, then there's intrigue. Like, then when this character's gone, they're gone completely. And that adds a lot of stress, and that's really good for, like, a story.
Yeah.
I read a I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I read a short story, and I can't remember where I read it or what it was called, but it was like a Groundhog Day situation, a time loop, and whenever the main character died, it would reset until somebody else died instead of him. and then it didn't reset, and then he had to live the rest of his life knowing that like this person died to save him from that time loop, to save him from dying. It's just an interesting way that they did the resurrection and then how they broke it.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is interesting because there's a Vocaloid song with a similar concept. Except it's two characters stuck in a time loop trying to save each other. So like it starts off with the girl dying, and then the boy tries to save her over and over again and keeps failing. So eventually he pushes her out of the way and sacrifices himself. And then the girl wakes up and goes, "Oh no, I'm stuck in the loop again." And so you find out that they're both stuck in like this death loop, trying to like save each other from dying, and they keep trying to sacrifice themselves instead in it. And then the other person gets stuck in the loop. I don't know. When people do stuff like that with that, like taking that kind of stuff and going like a twist with it, it's always very interesting.
I feel like the last stretch of All You Need Is Kill, which is the manga that Edge of Tomorrow is based on loosely, is very interesting with this as well. I think I may have talked about it episode, but I'm gonna talk about it again. Because the ending of that is sort of similar, because in the manga both Rita and Cage are in the time loop at the same time, and the sort of reveal in the sort of climax of the story is that because they're both in the time, because of the way that the time travel works in that story with the mimics, they're both now sort of like antennas, which is what they're called in the book. If you're like a thing that can control the time travel, you become an antenna, and the whole thing is that they have to kill all the mimics loop. But in the manga, what ends up being is that because they're both antennas, one of them has to die. The finale is Rita and Cage having this fight to the death over who's going to live after the loop is over. It's fucking crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The manga is so much darker than the movie. I fucking love it.
Mm-hmm. Could we go on like a quick like death loop tangent for a second, if that's okay?
Sure.
Yeah, because the one, like, there's another story that kind of like allows your character to like die as much as possible, but when that character is complete, like when there is suddenly no lifeline anymore for your character, that's when stakes are like really high, and that's Nier Automata. Like through the black box thing, your character can die over and over and over, and even self-destruct at one point, and you'll be fine. But then, after I think after the virus that infects all of your HUD, like halfway through the story, your lifeline's kind of fucked at that point. And obviously, like, you know, if you die, you just kind of get placed back into the story. But like consequentially, or like within the context of the story, like there's no backup for your dad anymore. You're gonna be a completely changed person, which is really interesting. Gabe, do you want to elaborate on that, or?
I feel like the death is interesting in Nier. I feel like death is a little bit complicated in Nier, because it is both toying around being a video game and then like also having an in-world thing for death. I feel like that's always interesting when like games have in-universe explanations for death and resurrection. That's always fun. I feel like games sort of have a unique perspective on this almost, because like if Outer Wilds is a good example, but at like a more narratively driven game, like Elden Ring, which has like an in-universe thing for death, and like the whole game is building up to trying to find and kill this thing called destined death, which is the reason for like immortality, the in-universe reason for immortality. And then like once you have killed destined death, then you are now in a world where like death is now finite, and there's like I feel like any game that like toys around with like the idea of death having an in-universe thing that's always going to be very interesting.
Yeah, just the like in video games too, because because you naturally kind of like respawn back at the same mission anyway. Like, how do you kind of raise the stakes on that? Like, yeah, in some like with some other levels too, and this is going off on another tangent, but I won't make it so long. Just like level difficulty certainly kills your character quicker, but like, does it really like change you? Does it really like influence you? Anything? Like, obviously you have to change your strategy a bit, but like, and that's just gameplay wise. Anyway, yeah. So, Resurrection.
I'm not in like a good position to talk about it because I'm terrible at video games, but like Hades also does this.
Yes.
Yeah, like in universe reason for dying in resurrection and continued consequences across deaths, or even benefits across death as well.
Hades fucking rolls.
Hades is very good. I am terrible at video games, but I do like that one.
I think like, I mean, this is sort of like off focus, but I feel like something that like I feel like the way that Hades approaches death is something that like sort of like, cause I know quite a few people who like don't play very many video games, but they play Hades. I think Hades is like, the way that Hades approaches death, and it approaches like death and resurrection in a video game context, it's sort of like, it makes it way more approachable, because I feel like if you you like get better every time.
Yeah, it's absolutely, that's absolutely true. Like, I mean, I was playing it a while ago and I'd never got very far. Like the first few times I died on the way, and then like every other time I died when I got to the first boss, which I never managed to beat. But like, it's still like you get better every time, and like you're able to like build yourself up as you go, and that makes it feel like way less daunting coming from someone who does not play video games. Like, yeah, definitely it's a good game.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's the appeal too of like Souls likes, because like you die over and over and over, but you learn how to defeat these like insane bosses after how many times, right? And like the eventual like feeling of the eventual satisfaction of finally defeating that boss is like I understand why people love and adore Souls likes, because, or like the Souls games in general, because from, let's just say, like they adore FromSoft's games in general, because like, yeah, shit is really frustrating when you first get into it, but eventually after putting enough time in, like you'll get there, because they are beatable.
Yeah, but they're not easy.
Yeah.
Any more comments on Resurrection?
I also, okay, this is just because I have a story that does this, but I think it's really fun. This is really terrible of me. But I think it can be really fun sometimes to have like, someone die, and then like, time passes, the people in their lives like have moved on and like adjusted and all that, and then bring them back to life just to like throw a wrench into things. There's like that TV show, the airplane one, Gabe, you know what I'm talking about?
Disney's Planes?
No, there's like a show where like a plane disappears.
Manifest.
I think
Manifest.
like a plane disappears, and then like years later it comes back.
Disney's Planes. I'm so sorry.
And so like there's a woman whose husband and one of her children were on that plane, and so much time has passed that like she had twins, one of them was on the plane, one of them wasn't, so now one of the twins is like older and the other one is still the same age as when they disappeared, and like she's moving on, and she's like, I don't remember if she's like married or engaged to someone else when her husband comes back. And like in that case, I don't think they died. I think they just like got time teleported or something like that. But it's like the same concept, and I've seen there's like a French TV show that does something similar where like a bunch of random people in a certain town start coming back to life, and again there's like twin sisters, and one of them's a teenager and the other one's still like a little girl, and and the family has to like have this emotional of like there's the emotions of like your lost child coming back to life and that kind of stuff that I think can be really interesting to explore. It just has to be done really well and like really specifically.
Yeah. I mean, like, there's certainly plenty of media that do resurrection and time skips badly. Let's talk about Sherlock.
Oh my god.
Yeah, so I think for those who have seen it, you probably know what I'm referring to. The time skip where so Sherlock comes back. There's a bit of a time skip between then. Nothing's different, or like there's like a couple of like small differences here and there, but like largely everyone is still the same. It's like, why would you kill him off in the first place?
Also, I just want to say that show that I mentioned is called The Returned or Les Revenants. So, like, interesting if you're curious about it. There was also an American version made. But yes, continue talking about Sherlock and how bad it is.
Well, I'm pretty much done. Yeah, just where some people do it right, like Sherlock is one of the examples where you do it like terribly, because at that point, like, if your main character, in this instance Sherlock, gets brought back from the dead. Well, for those who know, like, he staged his own death, but like, no one knows to this day like what really happened. And even then,
the writers hate everyone.
Yeah, even then he was dead. But there was little development from Sherlock's end on everything. Like, he's still like a very egotistical, snarky asshole, without any real development on everything whatsoever. Like, he hasn't come back changed, and the people that have moved on from his life don't seem to have either.
No, they literally like they're just like, oh, you're back, and then they just go back to life as normal, as if nothing changed.
Yeah, like,
it's stupid.
Yeah, and that's not to say that like, eventually you would have to go back to some normalcy, but like, you like settling down after something that traumatic for everyone involved, like, should not have been done the way that it was done in Sherlock. Like, yes, like, eventually, you eventually kind of meet old friends, but their lives have been changed for, like, in the time that you were dead. Like, if you were dead for a solid year and then you came back, things would be so much different.
Yeah, and that's like, and things would be different, and then you'd struggle to adjust to it. And when stories address that, I think it can be really, really interesting. But in the case of something like Sherlock, they're like, you have Sherlock being kind of upset that Mary's around, I guess, but then he's just, whatever, I'm gonna talk about myself at your wedding because I'm more important than you, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Shows that's a I feel like we've talked a lot tonight about situations that can where it depends on what you're rating, and I feel like that is a show where none of that was taken into account at any point in the whole series, where whether or not anything works was taken into account in the whole time they were rating it.
Yep.
Taking stuff into account? I don't think they know how to do that.
They thought?
I don't think he knows how to think. I don't think Moffat knows how people work.
Yeah.
No, I don't think he does either.
Alrighty. I feel like that's a good time to move on to the next question I had for the podcast.
Yeah.
All right, with everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
What does it feel like when you've come across a good death scene? How does it make you feel?
Heartbroken.
Yeah.
Same.
Permanent memory shit.
I've cried over the death of a pigeon before because of how well it was written. This pigeon, this bird, was a reoccurring character for 2 books before they cut it in half with a sword.
Oh my god! Yo!
Like,
what the fuck?
For some backstory on this, so it's the Becca Cooper trilogy in the 2nd book. So Becca Cooper has the ability to communicate with the ghosts that ride on the backs of pigeons. It is part of the lore in the world. I can explain that, but it'll take me a long time.
Okay,
This
we'll just go with it.
This particular pigeon is a jerk. His name is Slapper. He is a clubfoot, and she has known him since she was a child, since she first started learning how to use this ability of hers. And he follows her from her hometown to a different town where she is chasing counterfeit coins. He has the ghost of a smuggler, I guess, that was involved in this ring of counterfeit coins and chases after one of the other people involved, who just cuts this bird in half because this bird is flying after him. Doesn't know who this bird is, doesn't know what's significant about the bird. But the fact that when Becca comes up and finds the bird on the ground and tries to push the 2 halves back together, it was heartbreaking.
So fucked up. Wow. Holy shit.
And the pigeon meant so much to her that when she goes to her friend and she's like, he killed Slapper, her friend is like, go for it. I'll tell the others where you've gone. Go. Because he knew how much this bird meant to her. It was just a well-written scene with a well-developed chemistry between these 2 characters, even though one of them is a pigeon.
Holy shit. Yeah, no, good deaths are, by their nature, good. When when it really just means something, taking into account everything that we've talked about, if it fulfills your character's arc, makes sense for them to die, then everyone will mourn, really. And because then at that point, there's nothing more that your character can do, or there's everything that your character could have done, and that's thing, and that impacts you as a person, and that impacts you as a consumer of that media, because then you're like, shit, I would have wanted more from this character, or oh, this character went out awesomely. It really affects you. It makes you hella emotional. I'm trying to come up with my own kind of examples now too.
So my brain just goes straight to Song of Achilles. Which I've talked about before, but it's it's vaguely a retelling of a part of the Iliad. Telling the life of Achilles and Patroclus specifically. So it's one of those things where you know what's coming from the beginning. But the build up to it, and I mean it's a Greek tragedy, it has that built into it, and so the build up to it, the inevitability of it, makes it kind of heartbreaking, as you see all the pieces falling into places you know where the story's going and what's gonna happen. Devastating. That book is so sad.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a good death for me, actually I recorded, or I jotted it down a little bit earlier. A good death for me was spoilers for Red Dead 2, Arthur's. It was very well paced and really for my overall kind of thoughts on the game, Arthur's character arc concluded incredibly, or at least the route that I ended up choosing. So for those who don't know, in Red Dead 2, midway through the game, Arthur gets tuberculosis, and it's pretty severe. And if you can imagine, in the 1800s Wild West, he's pretty much dead. So how then does he choose to live his life? Like, does he continue to be like a bastard outlaw, or does he choose to be better from that? And you can actually choose one of those two paths. And the hero arc, that he goes through, his redemption arc, basically like works really well while still staying very much to his character. It develops from a very loyal a very loyal badass cowboy to a noble badass cowboy. Like, that shit like impacted me a lot when I reached the ending of that story, because then it's like, look at everything that he's done, look at all the friends that he's made, like, see the world through a better lens. Like, it's fantastic. And like Arthur's story was, I think, like, it ended really well, I think, because like, they never bring him back to life. Like, he is just referred to throughout and again, spoilers for Red Dead 2, but like the epilogue where you're playing as John, like his legacy continues on. He doesn't have to physically be there for for Arthur Morgan's story to continue, because his story is living on through the people that he's saved, which is incredible. Like, that's a really good way of handling like the legacy of a character who's passed away. Gabe, do you have any examples of a good death?
I do. I'm hesitant. I'm a little hesitant to talk about it because the Chainsaw Man anime is like slowly approaching, and I feel ever so slightly hesitant to talk about a major character death in an anime that is like just about to come out. So I won't go into. I'll try not to go into too much detail. Or no, you know what? Do you guys care about Chainsaw Man spoilers?
No.
No.
Okay. Dean make a comment on like the YouTube and the Spotify that there's spoilers at this point. I don't know how long we are into the recording.
It's just Dean, doing your editing, flash up on the screen the timestamp for shut the fuck up.
Okay. I just need to have a spoiler warning for every single episode of we could literally be talking about pens and there would be a spoiler warning.
But okay, for Dean and Post, the Chainsaw Man spoilers will stop here. This is the text on the screen will say when you are safe. Okay, so in Chainsaw Man there is this character Aki, and Aki is the actual reason to read Chainsaw Man, because Denji's like a funny, wacky protagonist, but Aki is like he's sort of, I feel like he gets compared to Sasuke a lot, but he's so much better than Sasuke. But he does sort of fill that role of like the more stoic, a little bit edgy, serious boy side supporting character. And so in Chainsaw Man, there's the big bad in Chainsaw Man, or I guess like the false flag big bad, because there's another one is the Gun Devil. And the Gun Devil is just it's a giant creature made out of gun. And when Aki was a kid, the Gun Devil went on a rampage across Earth and like killed it's like thousands of people, including Aki's family. So Aki's like, he's very revenge based, and he became a devil hunter with like Makima's agency, so that he could eventually kill the Gun Devil. And it's through this that he meets Denji and he meets Power, and he like gets wrapped up in all these events, and eventually these two assassins who are sent by the Gun Devil attack, and they kill they kill his partner Himeno, and so Aki has a sword, which is it is so in Chainsaw Man there are two ways that there are a bunch of ways that people can interact with devils, but the two ways that are important for Aki are fiends and contracts. So if a fiend is basically when a person's body becomes like possessed by a devil, and a contract is when someone has some like ability. They're still a normal person, but they have an ability that is given to them by a devil in return for some form of like curse consequence type deal. And for Aki, he has a sword that is cursed, where every time he uses it, he loses bits and pieces of his lifespan. So for the first little bit of Chainsaw Man, he never uses it, and then after using it like crazy, he's just like he's very gung ho about it, and he's slowly chipping away at his life. So I feel like what's cool about this for a death is that it's very not death flag. It's very death flaggy, but it's not being coy about it. I feel like where a lot of stories falter with death flags is that it's like some of them think they're being like sneaky about it, and I feel like some of the ways they're written, it seems like they think they're like smarter than you, but I feel like Chainsaw Man is, because it tells you right away what the sword is, and then you see over the course of the story that he becomes very reckless with the sword when he's this state of grief. And then right near the ending of the story, he's sort of formed this rapport with Denji and Power and with his second partner Angel, and he's sort of gotten to this place where he like doesn't really so much want to die anymore. And then he finds out and then he basically has like this vision that he has this vision that they're all going to die, and about it. So he goes to Makima and he's like Makima, I will do literally anything to make sure these people don't die, because they're all I care about. They mean everything to me. It doesn't matter what happens to me, just make sure that they live. And so Makima's like, okay, I'm going on a secret operation to kill the gun devil, and I'm going to take you with me. So Aki goes with Makima and a couple other characters to go kill the gun devil, and they have this big fight, and then it goes back to Denji, Power, and Aki's apartment, where Denji and Power are just chilling. They don't know about this fight with the gun devil that's been going down, and they hear a knocking on their door, and Denji goes to answer the door. And the whole story, the whole Chainsaw Man, Denji has been receiving a vision in his nightmares where he sees a door and he hears a voice that says, "Don't open the door." And then, so right in this penultimate scene, he hears the knocking on the door, and he hears this like knocking on the door. It's the same knocking from his dream. He's got chills down his spine. He's terrified about what's behind the door. And then Power, because she's part devil, she can smell who's behind the door, and she says Aki is behind. So Denji goes to open the door, and Aki is there, but he's fucked up looking, and he has a sort of fleshy pistol sticking out of his head, and he has a fleshy machine gun coming out of his arm. And it's sort of revealed here that the fight with the gun devil was a total failure, and Aki has now ended up being possessed by the gun devil. And so Denji has to have like this huge fight with Aki. And during this, there is, in Aki's mind, because he's possessed, he doesn't see any of what's happening, but he has sort of this hallucination sequence over the course of this chapter where him, as a child, is having a snowball fight with his brother, who, in his vision, is Denji. And they're having a snowball fight, but in the real world, the effects of his snowball are like him firing these demonic blasts from his gun. He's destroying buildings. There's like people are dying, and then in the dream world, Aki, he throws another snowball at Denji, and then Denji's like, he just starts chucking snowballs at him, and he's like crying, and Aki's like, "Why the hell are you crying?" And then Denji disappears, and he goes back to look at his house, and this house is the one that we've seen in like his flashbacks to when his family was killed before. And then it goes back to the real world, and Denji is crying because he's like stabbed his chainsaws into Aki's like heart, and he's dead, and it's horrible, and it traumatized me, and I will never fuck. Read Chainsaw Man.
That cut off at a very amusing point for me.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah,
Same.
that was a good cutoff.
Oh no! Cut off? I cut off?
You cut off right when you said, "I will never fuck."
And then finish off with Read Chainsaw Man.
Chainsaw Man. I will never fuck. Read Chainsaw Man. No, I will never forget it. I will never fucking forget it. Read Chainsaw Man.
That's what I thought you were gonna say.
Nice.
I like ruined the whole. I just went through this emotional breakdown and it just capped it off. I will never fuck. No, I will never fucking forget
Nice.
it. Read Chainsaw Man. Best written character death that I think like I have ever seen. Truly, Aki's death is tremendous writing.
Nice.
Nice. I want to say that wraps up everything that I wanted to talk about on this podcast. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add before we wrap it up?
I know I name dropped a few people as we went. Should I expand on those?
Case study.
Cassandra Clare is a very good example of someone who will like build up a character just to kill them off for like the shock value of it. Often does this with like child characters as well. Pisses me off. I think it's really manipulative way of writing. Please don't do this. Just be a better writer.
Mhm.
And also, we didn't really touch on this when we were talking about like sacrifice. But like, you mentioned like right away, Marie-Soleil, something like, do you kill off a character only to like motivate your other characters? There's a lot of really bad tropes based around this idea. Like fridging is a good example where like you'll just kill off often in the backstory, like a wife or girlfriend or daughter of the main broody male character, just to like give him like a revenge arc. Oftentimes done very poorly. Another example of this, though, that is not fridging, is in the Throne of Glass books by Sarah J. Maas, Nehemiah's death.
Oh no. Surprised we didn't talk about that earlier.
Listen, we're talking about this because this still makes me fucking mad. Nehemiah, introduced as the only character of color in Throne of Glass at the beginning. She adds more later, but don't know if it's well done. Only character of color in the beginning. Befriends Selena, Aelin, whatever the fuck you want to call her, alien. Listen, but befriends her, and then in character, canonically, sacrifices herself in order to motivate Aelin to reclaim her throne and, like, get rid of the king that has, like, destroyed magic or whatever else the fuck. Like, canonically, in character, the only character of color in these books dies brutally, horribly, off screen, but you still get the descriptions of what she looks like when she's dead, just to motivate the white main character. There's a name for that trope. It's not good. Anyway, there's lots of bad death tropes. Write better.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yep.
the worst death. I think the most. I had to write this down so I didn't forget it. The death that has annoyed me the most, because it's like, I feel like, I don't know if we talked about this when we were talking about resurrections, just now, but like, I feel like the worst death that I've ever seen is Trinity in the Matrix trilogy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's so fucking, like, I feel like it's one thing to just resurrect a character. That was already like silly. I feel like it's like a fucking, it's like I don't know, it's like kicking other metaphors, but it's bad, other metaphors for the bad, but it's like, it's bad that she like gets resurrected and nothing comes of that, and then she dies for like no reason, and it's so stupid. And then they get resurrected again in the fourth one.
Okay.
The Matrix is a mess.
Yeah.
I love Reloaded and Revolutions to death, and I will defend them, but that shit is whack.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we've already went in depth about like Eddie's death, so that one was really stupid to me.
Can I talk about this? The like the vampire theory?
No.
What?
Have you not
Is
heard
that
about
not-
this?
Is that
No.
not what you were alluding to?
No.
I thought that's where you were going.
No, I did.
We talked
No,
about
I
it.
had no idea about that.
You don't know about the vampire? A lot of people think that Eddie's gonna come back as a servant of Vecna in the next season.
That's stupid. That sounds really stupid.
It is. They're trying to pull more D&D parallels into Stranger Things, and it doesn't quite fit, but it fits enough that they've built a theory around it.
I feel like
I guess,
The-
but
People are also convinced that Steve and Eddie are in love when they talked to each other like twice in the whole season, so...
People also shipped Steve and Billy.
Ugh. Anyway,
that one I can at least see the basis of though, because they did punch each other a couple times. I do understand.
they did
Some
have
degree.
a couple of actual homoerotic scenes, so like I get it, but also get better taste. Billy's a bad character.
yeah.
I love the Billster.
We know Gabe. He's
We
a
know.
good villain. I hate him though.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're not talking about...
We're not talking about Stranger Things. We did that episode.
We did that. Yeah, we did that episode, and we did that plenty tonight.
We're talking about death.
We're talking
Anybody
about
have
death.
anything else to say about death?
I want to.
Get better at it.
Jesus, Gabe,
Gabe, what did you say?
you fucking idiot. Don't say shit like that. Holy fuck.
Anyway, I was gonna say get better at it. And get better at writing it
Yeah.
specifically.
I don't know how much this makes sense, but writers, if you're gonna kill, go for the heart. And what I mean by that is make sure your death fucking hits the heart.
And make sure it hits the heart in like an actual well built up way and you're not just being manipulative with your writing.
Yeah.
All right, then. I can end the episode on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then, with all that being said, let's close out for tonight. So, thank you, everyone who's listening in. We are the Ink Guild on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr. Our main home is on YouTube and Spotify, but you can also connect with us individually through our own social media. If you're interested in what we do, then consider subscribing to our Patreon for as low as $3 for exclusive content, but ultimately keep an eye out for more podcasts and other creative projects. Thanks again for listening, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Sweet dreams.
Don't die.
And if you do die, do it interestingly.
Holy shit.
Good night.